Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another night of Apologia. My name's Eric. I work here. I'm going to give you just some quick insights on what the night will look like, where the bathrooms are, where the water is, and then we'll get the show on the road. So most important thing first, the bathrooms. Very inconveniently located on opposite ends of the lobby. The men's restrooms there, the women's restrooms over there. The water fountain is a mystery. Good luck finding that. Just kidding. It's by the men's restroom on that side. If you need, while you're out in the lobby, out and about in the intermission, there are 5 tables out there. I can't keep them all straight, so I wrote them down for your benefit and mine. So FPIW is out there, Family Policy Institute of Washington. They're familiar faces around Apologia evenings. 40 Days for Life, Abundant Life, Sidewalk Advocates for Life, and 3W Medical for Women are all out there. Really significant organizations doing really good work on this subject. So take some time to linger out there with them, chat with them if you haven't already. A glimpse at what the flow of the evening will look like in a minute. Our guest will come out, Abby Johnson, and join us. We'll spend about an hour in discussion, and through that time, we'll have a number on the screens. That number's gonna pop up now. It'll pop up a few more times, but try to capture it now if you can. Take a picture of it, make a note. That's the number to text your questions to, and text them as you think of them. Text them right away. Don't wait until the end to send them in. That lets us process them, sort them, and get them on the docket for the second half of our evening. So we'll spend the first hour in discussion together, take a 15-minute intermission for the inconvenient bathrooms and the mysterious water fountain, and then we'll come back for our last 45 minutes together where we will tackle the questions that y'all have texted in. Fair enough? All right, so let me introduce our guest for this evening, Abby Johnson. To some of you, she needs no introduction, but for others, you may be surprised at some of the details of her story. She is eminently qualified to comment on every angle of pro-life, pro-choice. She used to work for Planned Parenthood, was a spokesperson for them, was associated with one of their clinics, and had a significant encounter. She participated and observed a baby fighting for its life as it was being aborted. And that began the journey to where she is now. Having written a book called Unplanned, which is a national bestseller. A movie was just made off that, spring of 2019. And now she travels really sharing pro-life issues, having these sorts of conversations, trying to engage with workers at Planned Parenthood clinics, working with legislators, really doing everything that she can to protect the unborn. So, with no further ado, would you please join me in welcoming Abby Johnson?
Well, welcome everybody. It's wonderful to see you all here. What a great crowd. Just in case some of you are at an Apologia event for the first time, Apologia is really Westgate Chapel's answer to the fact that the church has been on the sidelines far too long on these kinds of issues, and it gives us an opportunity to address issues that are pertinent in the culture, but also have biblical clarity. That's our moral ground, is biblical clarity. So it's really amazing for us to get to do these kinds of events once a month, and especially to have Abby Johnson joining with us. So if you're watching us online, if you're here in the congregation, would you join me one more time in thanking Abby for taking the time to be here? Joining us tonight also on the platform is Carrie Abbott. Many of you from the Seattle area know Carrie really well. President of the Legacy Institute, host of a daily radio program. And if you need to know more about Legacy Institute, which I'd encourage you to do, and if you're visiting from another church, your pastor would really be advantaged by going on that site because of all the resources that are available to your pastor that are there. But I'd like to jump right into the subject and just ask you, Abby, if you would just start out telling your story. Some of the folks here have probably seen the movie or have heard your story, but I think it would be wonderful for you just to begin from the beginning.
Sure. Hello. I don't know. It's on. Hello? Yeah, okay. Try this one, maybe. No. I mean, I am loud enough to do this without a mic, so, okay, here we go. It's working. Okay, all right, here we go. That's when you're a mom of 8. You don't really need a mic, but, yeah, well, thank you, Pastor, for having me. Thank you for Westgate for having me. I have to say, unfortunately, I'm not in churches very often, so this is really an honor for me to be sitting in the house of God and sharing about an issue that is so important today in the church. So I do appreciate the opportunity. A little about me. I worked for Planned Parenthood, as many of you know, for 8 years of my life. I didn't start out that way. I didn't grow up supporting abortion. I grew up in a very pro-life home. I would say I grew up in a Christian home. I grew up in a very conservative home. I remember my parents saying that we were pro-life, but my parents were not activists in any way, shape, or form. I did not grow up in a church that spoke about the pro-life issue. We did not talk about abortion. We did not sit around the dinner table and talk about what it was to be pro-life or pro-choice. It was a different time then, late 70s, early 80s. So abortion was not in the media like it is today. Women were not standing up at a podium and shouting their abortion, right? There was not social media like there is today. And so it was just a very different time. Anything, discussing sexuality was still very taboo. And abortion was one of those things. And people were very private. And I remember, many of you will remember this. I remember going into the voting booth with my parents when I was a little kid. And some of you remember you used to go in and you would be in this booth that had a curtain around you. You remember this? Mm-hmm. Okay. And you would pull a thing and the curtain would close behind you. It was the coolest thing, okay? And I was a little kid, way cooler than what you do today. Okay, and I was a little kid, and then there were these little things these little tabs that you could flip down for whoever you wanted to vote for. And then when you wanted to record your vote, you would pull the lever like a slot machine. Okay, you would pull the lever, and then it would record your vote, and the tabs would flip up, and the curtain would open. It was like a surprise, and you're like, and you're done. Okay, so I used to go, and my parents would go one by one and allow me to go into the voting booth with them, right? And they would let me flip the tabs down, and they would tell me, okay, vote for this, flip it down. But they were like, you cannot tell anyone who we voted for. You cannot tell your friends because it was private. Right? Things back then were private. It wasn't like they were ashamed of who they voted for, but things were private back then. People still had a filter, right? So not everything that came into the head came right out of the mouth. I would have been in trouble back then. So anyway, so it's just a different time. And so I think my parents, they had taught me the biblical pathway to marriage. They had taught me about abstinence, and I was an only child. And so I think they just thought, we've taught Abby this way, and as long as she follows this, then abortion's never going to be on the table. And so, we don't want to talk about something so uncomfortable with our little girl, and so they didn't. And I went to college. I was, free from my parents and thought I knew everything, as 17, 18-year-olds do. And, news alert, your parents actually do know what they're talking about. And then I started getting involved in risky relationships and got involved with a guy that was 8 years older than me. That relationship became physical very fast. And that was when I ended up having my first unplanned pregnancy and ended up having my first abortion. And that first abortion really led me down a path that then led me to be a volunteer at Planned Parenthood, which then led to another abortion, which then led to me being a lobbyist for Planned Parenthood, which then led to me being a sex educator for Planned Parenthood, educating young children starting in kindergarten and first grade on very graphic, very vile sex education programs with Planned Parenthood, hundreds of thousands of children that I sold this propaganda. It's not really education, it's propaganda that we're selling to children in order to break down their natural modesty, in order to sever the child-parent relationship at a very early age. I sold that to hundreds of thousands of children, and then ultimately that led to an 8-year career with Planned Parenthood, where I helped to facilitate over 22,000 abortions. And, many things had happened in that last year at Planned Parenthood, but ultimately I ended up leaving after being called in to assist with an ultrasound-guided abortion, which I'm not a doctor, I'm not medical staff, I'm a licensed therapist, but I'm not medical personnel. But inside of the abortion industry, you don't have to be licensed or trained really to assist in invasive medical procedures. So I was called in to assist with the ultrasound, and I watched in horror as a 13-week-old baby fought and struggled for his life against the abortion instruments. And, that wasn't supposed to happen, because I had been taught by Planned Parenthood that the unborn fetus did not have sensory development or did not feel anything in the womb until 28 weeks gestation. And I had then in turn said that lie to, hundreds, possibly thousands of women who had come into our facility and had asked me that very frequently asked question, will my baby feel this? And we had been given that scripted answer to give to them. But, here it was right in front of my face. I'm seeing that that's a lie. And I knew then that there was humanity in the womb, there was life in the womb, that I had been lied to, that I had then in turn lied to so many women, that I had believed a lie, I had championed a lie. I wasn't a victim. I had eagerly believed that lie for money, primarily. And really to believe in something. It had become my identity, being this secular, pro-choice feminist had become who I was. And I really didn't know who I was without that, because my identity was no longer in Christ. I had grown up that way, but I had veered so far away from who I was in Christ. My identity was not in Him anymore. And so I ended up leaving. And when I left, Planned Parenthood took me to court. They attempted to get a permanent gag order against me to try to silence me, which then begs the question, what don't they want you to say? which is everything I say now. You know, they don't want the truth coming out about abortion. They don't want the truth about what's taking place to these preborn humans. They don't want that coming out because the primary victim of abortion is the preborn child. And the reason that abortion continues to escalate in our country is because the primary victim is unseen. And so if you begin to graphically describe what is taking place to the primary victim of abortion, people begin to visually understand what's taking place. They begin to see this victim, right? They begin to see what's happening. They begin to understand what's really taking place inside of the womb, and they begin to visualize that victim. And when you visualize a victim, you suddenly begin to have a heart for that victim. And you begin to see that victim in a new way. You begin to humanize that victim. And the humanization of the unborn is one of the greatest threats to the abortion industry. They need you to believe that that preborn human being is not a human being. And so they wanted desperately to keep me silent. They took me to court. They tried to get a gag order. They tried to silence me. That obviously failed. And what it did, though, and this just shows, God's hand over everything. What it did was that it actually then caused the media to say, well, what does this lady know? And we want to know. And so it really just caused this sort of media firestorm. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting on Fox News and MSNBC, and they're asking questions. And it really just threw me out into the media. And I have to say, God knew exactly what he was doing. He used their foolishness for his purpose. And he's so good at doing that. And so, I mean, really, I wouldn't be doing what I am doing today if they had not made the missteps that they made. And now I just feel very grateful because I'm able to use my past for his glory. And that's what he wants of all of us.
Thank you. In your book, you talk about the way Planned Parenthood present themselves and what they want the public to think they're accomplishing and how they're helping society. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so I mean, when I first went to work for Planned Parenthood 20 years ago, which is, I can't be that old. When I went to work for Planned Parenthood 20 years ago, the talking point was Planned Parenthood is trying to keep abortion safe, legal, and rare, right? That was the talking point. We heard it from everybody. We heard it from presidents, right? That's what Bill Clinton said. That's what Obama said. That's what many people said. That's what, Laura Bush said. I mean, that's what first ladies were saying. That's many, many people in politics were saying that. That's what the pro-choice movement was saying. And that's how they were really getting people to join their movement, because that sounds very palatable. It sounds better than the truth that they want easy access to abortion, elective, for any reason, at any stage, government funded. Right? I mean, that people are like, I don't know. Like if you say that, right? That causes a pause. But if you say, no, we want it safe, legal, and rare, that sounds like something, maybe I can get on board with that, right? As if abortion is some sort of necessary evil. And that's how it was presented to me, truly, when I was a college student 20 years ago. And so for me, as someone who had not really grown up knowing not going to something like this as a young person as you are, you guys here on the front row, I didn't know the ins and outs of the talking points of abortion. I didn't understand, I just didn't understand. I didn't understand the apologetics. And so I was very naive. I was very vulnerable to what they were saying to me. So that sounded smart. That sounded like it made sense. Now we have really shifted into a different space. The pro-abortion movement has over the past 10 years, we have all watched them sort of shift into a different movement, a different space, which, by the way, the whole safe, legal, and rare, that was a lie. Okay, that's never what they wanted. It just sounded better. They've always wanted unrestricted, unfettered access to abortion for any and all reasons, government funded. But now they're just much more brazen about it. So now they don't even, it's like no holds barred about what they want, and they're much more willing to say what they want now. So when I went to work there, it was all about, prevention. We're trying to prevent the need for abortion. That was the lie that we were putting out there, and I believed it. I mean, I fell hook, line, and sinker. Like, it's about birth control, it's about birth control. When really we know, according to their own statistics, that 54% of women having abortions were using contraception at the time they got pregnant, right? So we know the answer actually isn't more birth control. The answer is self-control. But self-control doesn't make money for them. Birth control does. Birth control increases the rate of abortion. They know that. It's all over their own statistics. They put it out there. Their own statistics say it. Okay. So, and that was our business plan. You put young girls on a method of birth control, on the pill, a method of birth control that has a high human error rate,
right,
a high human failure rate, with the intention that they're not going to take that pill like they're supposed to, knowing that they won't, so that they will fail, so that they will get pregnant, so that they will come back to you for an abortion. We will then perform that abortion on them without their parents knowing. And hopefully they will have had their first abortion by the time, they're 15, 16 years old. And then their second abortion by the time they're 21, and their third abortion by the time they're 30. The ideal abortion patient is 3 abortions by 30 years of age. That's their business model. But we shifted about, in the past 10 years, we've shifted away from the safe, legal, and rare, and they don't even want their supporters saying that anymore. So, if they hear someone saying, we want to keep abortion safe, legal, and rare, they will correct them and say, no, we don't say that anymore. And I've heard them do it. They say, no, we don't say that anymore, because if you want something to be rare, that sort of instinctively says that that's something bad. And by saying safe, legal, and rare, that creates abortion stigma. And that's that's a buzz phrase for them, abortion stigma. They want to reduce abortion stigma as much as possible. So they say if something is rare, that means that sort of says to someone it's bad. If something's bad, you want it rare. If something's good, you want it plentiful. So we don't want abortion rare. We want it plentiful. We want it accessible to everyone at any age for any reason through all 9 months of pregnancy. So they want to reduce abortion stigma. They want you to pay for it. They want me to pay for it. And now, if you look at their annual report for the past 10 years, all of these preventative services that Planned Parenthood once touted, right? Birth control, STD testing, Pap smears, things like that, women's health care that they used to be so proud of that they provided. All of those services, this is according to their own report. You can go back and look at their reports. Now, we've done the work for you. But if you go back and you do the math and you look at their own annual reports that they put out, every single one of those services have plummeted more than 70% over the past 10 years. The only thing that has increased in the past 10 years at a Planned Parenthood facility has been abortions. And
testosterone.
Government funding. Government funding, abortion. And so we're really like entering into a new, just sort of brazen abortion full time. We're not hiding behind this facade of women's health care, preventative services. It is abortion. They've even now opened clinics that are full-time abortion. They don't do anything but abortion 6 days a week, 50 hours a week. No STD, no birth control, nothing. And why? Well, 2 reasons. 1, there's a spiritual component of child sacrifice. 2, also, it's money. That's their highest revenue-generating, lowest-cost product. They make the most money on abortion.
Talk to us then a little bit about the current, I believe it was passed in the last Washington State legislature session to put clinics now in the schools. I think I've heard you commenting on that on other talk shows. Well, obviously, we can guess at what their strategy is, but they obviously want our kids at a younger age.
I mean, yeah, that's the whole goal. They're not coming after us, guys. Like, for anybody in here that's, 35 and up, they're done with us, okay? They're like, you're dead to us, okay? Like, they're done with us. They are coming for our young people. They're coming for young people of reproductive age. So, you see all these like beautiful young people here. That's who they're targeting. So they're coming for our young people. They're coming for them starting at 5 years old and up. They are intentionally trying to move into public and private schools. I mean, don't be fooled. If there's a secular private school for them to move into, they will try to get into a secular private school. But primarily public schools. They will infiltrate under the guise of a healthcare facility, but it will really be a Planned Parenthood. But they won't call themselves a Planned Parenthood. They are funding it primarily through Title X funding. And this is why elections matter. And I don't want to get too political here, even though I will. But this is why elections matter. People are like, oh, it doesn't matter who we elect. It all stinks, right? But this is why it matters. Because when you have a pro-life person in office, when you have someone who's actively trying to defund the abortion industry, when they are trying to actively defund Planned Parenthood, this is when you sort of see things begin to change, okay? So when President Trump was in office, he defunded the Title X program from Planned Parenthood and all abortion providers, okay? Abortion providers use the Title X program for a couple of things. One, they use it to fund their minor male-to-female and female-to-male transgender transitioning programs. They do it without parental consent, and they do it for free, okay? 2, They use it to run their teen clinics. So Title 10 has a provision in it that says that any minor that is approved for Title 10 funding is allowed to receive services without parental consent. Okay? So they can go in and they can get services without their parents knowing. In fact, we can't even ask for parental consent. We can't even ask for any sort of parental involvement, okay, if they're a Title 10 client. So that's what they're using this money for. So when President Trump was in office, he removed Planned Parenthood and all abortion providers from that program. That was a huge win. Yeah. Because that was actually protecting children from the predators of Planned Parenthood, right? But now, Title 10 has become like a ping pong ball with politicians. So now it has been refunded by Joe Biden. And now children are allowed to go into teen clinics. They're allowed to go into the abortion industry and receive services from Planned Parenthood and other abortion providers without their parents knowing. They're able to go in and receive, and I'm talking about 12, 13-year-olds, right, are able to go, and younger, are able to go into a Planned Parenthood, and a 12-year-old is able to say, a 12-year-old little girl is able to say, you know what, I think I want to be a boy. And so I want to take hormones. I want to take transitioning hormones. And they're able to give those to that little girl for free without her parents knowing. This could permanently alter her body for the rest of her life. Mm-hmm. This could render her infertile for the rest of her life. And her parents will have no idea. Mm-hmm. That's why elections matter.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So sometimes we think, well, who cares, right? Like, what does our vote matter? And even sometimes I think here, like in states where you're like, who cares? Like, I'm in Washington State. It still matters. It still matters.
Yes, it does.
Your vote is still setting the tone. Because if everybody sits around and they're like, well, I'm not even going to vote because it doesn't matter, then it'll never matter. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right? It'll never matter. But if you continue to do your work, if you continue to do your due diligence, if you continue to get the word out, if you continue to get like-minded people like you, right, out spreading the word about what's happening in your state and what these damaging policies are doing to your children, to your families. I mean, to marriages, mm-hmm, to young boys, to young girls, to your school system. If you continue to do that, then you will eventually get enough people thinking like you, right? Mm-hmm. But if all of you just continue to sit it out and go, it doesn't matter, because we're in Washington, who cares? Then nothing ever changes. Yes. And let me just say, now is the time for good people, particularly parents, to step up and take their place on school boards, city councils. Yeah. Even if you feel like this looks like a losing battle, somebody's got to start challenging these people in office. Somebody has got to start speaking up and saying, you know what, you have an opponent now, and it's me. Mm-hmm. And you're not going to go unopposed anymore. Mm.
I'd like to add, so thank you so much for what you shared so far, and I know you have a lot more to add to that and your story.
I do. We can do this all night.
We could do this all night. And we will. No, we're kidding. We're locking the doors. I just
Somebody DoorDash food here.
That's right. I just want to bring a perspective. If you've been hearing her talk about Planned Parenthood, I and many people like yourselves have gone into schools and taught, and we would go in after Planned Parenthood. But I want you to catch what she said about her own story. She grew up with wonderful parents, and her parents did the right thing. And she stepped into a dark place. There's only dark or light. Don't get caught up in the gray, because that really doesn't exist. If you step in and you do one thing and have a promiscuous relationship, or you have something outside of God's blessing, it is the first death. And then once you start down that road, it's amazing how you get drawn in, and good people and wonderful young women get drawn in. But Planned Parenthood is an example of the evil one behind Planned Parenthood. And so you have all these things that she's talked about going on. In the very beginning, God made male and female, brought them together, and the two streams of humanity to produce people made in his image. And that whole picture in Genesis is something that we take for granted almost, but the fact that God decided to make people in his image, and we're the only part of his creation with an essence linked to his image. The enemy hates your image. The enemy hates you because he hates that you image him. And so Planned Parenthood is one of the few organizations that has been assaulting that image in the womb. But notice now that they're going after the rest of the story. They're adding testosterone to the picture. And they have where are the parenting classes at Planned Parenthood? Has anybody ever signed up for a parenting class? Planned Parenthood? There's no parenting classes there. It's the biggest lie. And Margaret Sanger back in the day worked with Eugenicists, and there's been a plan to get rid of people, remove those image bearers. So when you think, oh, well, that was Abby's story with this organization that I have nothing to do with, no, you all have something to do with Planned Parenthood, because Planned Parenthood is behind everything you see at the UN, the rights of the child, or you see all the policies coming down through sex education. It all gets filtered through their whole system. Every curriculum that you have stood up against, they are behind it as well. So it isn't just women, and it isn't just abortion. They are really an example of a behemoth that has evil intent to undo all of that creation story and undo the family. So it's not just about even the abortion issue, although that's clearly where Abby comes in. So I appreciate that you've spoken about this. Abby, I want to go back to your story for a moment, because you're a woman who saw this child being killed in this moment. And nobody wants to talk about graphic images here, but the fact is, as you and I have talked even privately, because it's been so sterilized in the church, we don't really recognize, and you had to recognize what was happening in front of you. What happened to you as a person truly happened to you? Was it shocking to you? Were you angry? How did you respond in that moment? Do you remember?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually in that moment when I was watching it. I felt very numb. Sort of hard to describe, but I felt very numb. I felt very, very stupid. I just felt very betrayed. And the betrayal kept coming. It wasn't a one-time feeling. It was a very disappointing time in my life. I remember just watching it and just thinking, why is this happening? This can't be. And I didn't leave immediately. It actually took me a week to leave the clinic, because I really, really, really tried to justify what I had seen. I did not want to leave my job. I made a ton of money. And my husband was a teacher, so I was like, we'll be broke if I quit. And so I made a ton of money, and again, like I said, that was my identity. That's who I was. And I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do. If this isn't me, I don't know who I am. And I tried really hard to justify it. Like, maybe that's not what I saw. Maybe it was something else. Maybe maybe that baby wasn't fighting for his life. I really, and then I thought, I can change Planned Parenthood. Then I went through that phase. Then I was like, I can fix them. Because I'm innately a fixer. I think I can fix everybody. And so that's why I became
Plus,
a
you got Employee of the Year, didn't you?
I did. I got Employee of the Year.
I mean, of course.
I became a therapist to fix people. So I was like, I can fix this multi-billion organization. And so I was like, I'm going to fix them. And I'm going to make us not about abortion. Like, that's what I thought. And, but then after being there a week, I was sitting in my office, and I had said to myself, I'm not going to participate in abortion anymore. So I was like, somehow I had convinced myself that I was going to be able to be the director of an abortion facility and not participate in abortion anymore. I was like, I'll work it out. And then I was sitting in my office, and I looked out my window, and because we didn't do surgical abortion every day, but we did medication abortion pretty much every day. And I saw this I was looking at my window, and I saw this woman walking out, and she had this little brown paper bag. And I was just like, I'm still doing it. Mm-hmm. I'm not in the room. I'm not counseling her on the abortion. I'm not giving her the pills. But my paycheck is coming from this abortion. I'm still complicit in it. I'm still here. I'm still doing it. And that's when I just said, I can't do it anymore. And I said, I can't fix them. I can't fix this, Sometimes things are too, never people, but some people are never too far gone. But sometimes things, sometimes corporations, sometimes organizations you can't fix them from the inside out. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's too evil, and the Bible says you have to flee from it. You don't compromise with it, you flee from it. And that's where I was. I finally realized I can't fix this from within. I can't make it right from within. I see the evil. I recognize it's evil. What does the Bible say about that? Mm-hmm. I got to cut and run. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I did. And I was really blessed because I'd grown up with that faith foundation in my life. I'd grown up a believer. I'd grown up a Christian. I was baptized when I was 8. I'd had that relationship with the Lord, growing up. And so even though I'd stepped away from God, even though I'd stepped away from my faith, he was still actively pursuing me. Mm-hmm. And so even though I grew up with that faith foundation, I knew the scripture, I knew God, And so I feel very blessed in that. I knew that if I took that step of faith, didn't mean it wasn't scary, but I knew that if I took that step of faith, he would not desert me. Mm-hmm. And so I had to just trust that. And I thought, he's not going to leave me on the street, right? I'm going to have to make sacrifices, right? We had to go down to one car, and we had to move out of our home, and we had to go into a much smaller house, and we got rid of cable, and we got, we had to make sacrifices, and we got rid of a bunch of stuff, and but we did it. And he continued to provide for what we needed. Amen. Not what we wanted, right, all the time, but what we needed. And he got us through a tough time. And I got to tell you, our marriage was better for it. We healed from it. My husband found his place in our marriage. I had not allowed him to be the head of our home. I had emasculated him for years because that's what you do as a secular feminist. Mm-hmm. Secular feminism is one of the incredible downfalls of our society today, telling women that they need to be like men.
Right.
When we're not meant to be like men. We're meant to be like women. Not allowing men to be the leader of your house. Telling men they're not allowed to be the leader of their house. And so I basically had just so emasculated my husband that I had to allow him to be my husband again. And that took a great amount of healing for us. And he had to learn how to be a husband. He had to learn how to be a leader. And he had to learn how to be a provider. And I don't mean in the financial sense, but I mean in the spiritual sense.
Yeah.
And it was a beautiful thing. And it was a hard thing to do. It took a lot of apologizing on my part, and a lot of humility on my part, and a lot of groveling sometimes. But I was willing to do it because I was willing to heal our marriage. And I had to take my place in the home. I had to learn how to be a mom because I had a daughter that I completely neglected for my work because family wasn't important. Family's not important when you work in the abortion clinic.
Right.
I mean, if you saw him plan, you saw that my boss wanted me to abort my daughter, Grace. So I was working 80 hours a week. My husband was essentially a single father. So, I mean, we had to learn our roles in the home. We had to learn how to be a family. But when we did that, it healed our family. And we had to make a ton of sacrifices. Those sacrifices brought us closer together, learning what was really, really important.
So good. So good.
I think, yeah, thank you. I think one of the things the abortion industry, and by the way, if you're watching us on YouTube, I'd be surprised if they're still streaming this, but if you get cut off,
Just wait until I say vaccine. Now we're off.
We're done.
Now we're off.
We tried 3 times to advertise tonight on paid advertising on Facebook, and they denied us every time that we tried to advertise tonight. But if you do get cut off watching us on YouTube, go to westgatechapel.com. But I don't know how graphic you're willing to be, but I think for a lot of us, maybe this is more for men than for the women who are here. But I think the industry has kept a very safe distance from us really understanding what's going on. And could you talk to us about what really happens inside those clinics?
Yes. I mean, you want me to describe abortion?
Yes, please.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, let me just say, if you're prone to getting sick, or I have a lot of people faint in my talk, so I'm just putting that out there. If you're a fainter, I'm warning you now. Have somebody close that can catch you. Yeah, I mean, first trimester abortion makes up about 85% of abortion in the United States. It is, first trimester is up to 14 weeks gestation. Abortions in the first trimester are done through a vacuum. This vacuum is about 40 times more powerful than a household vacuum cleaner. And this is what they are inserting into a woman's very vascular uterus. And basically, the procedure starts by dilating the woman's uterus, and they do that through a series of graduated dilation rods. And they insert those into the cervix. So what would naturally happen during childbirth, they're going to force that to happen with these rods. The further along the woman is in her pregnancy, the larger the rods are, the dilation rods are. And they do that in order to be able to insert something called a suction cannula. The suction cannula is what is attached to a large suction machine. And that cannula is graduated. It gets bigger. What I mean by that is bigger, smaller, depending on how far along the woman is in her pregnancy. And the size of that varies on how big the baby's head is. So you have to have a cannula large enough to fit the head, the calvarium, through that tube. Now, I talk about first trimester, and people are like, there's no head. We're in first trimester here. No, there is. You can actually identify fetal body parts by 9 weeks gestation. So before that, you're not able to, outside of the body, identify fetal body parts, but at 9 weeks and above, you're able to actually identify fetal body parts. And part of our job inside of the clinic is once the abortion is completed, then we must take those fetal body parts. We put them in a glass baking dish, and we reassemble the parts of the baby. And we have a checklist that we have to check off. So we're looking for 2 arms, 2 legs, head, and a torso. And so for every abortion, we're required to check in check boxes that we have found all of those parts, and then we sign off on the bottom. The reason for that is because if we left part of the baby inside of the woman's womb, she could develop a very serious infection that could be fatal to her. And that's sort of a first trimester abortion. It's very bloody. It's very painful for the woman, of course. The suction is very powerful. Many times after the suction is completed, they will take something called a curette. And that is it's a long instrument that has a loop on the end, like a little circle loop. And it's very sharp. The end is very sharp on the end. And they will insert that into the woman's uterus, and they scrape the inside of the uterus. And they do that to make sure that they got everything, they pulled everything away from the uterus, and then they go back in with the suction and suction everything else out once again. So the primary complication from a first trimester abortion procedure is a uterine perforation. So they don't use typically an ultrasound during a first trimester abortion. So they have this suction tube that they're inserting into the woman's uterus, and they're poking and they're poking and they're poking, and they're waiting for this jar that's on the suction machine to fill up with blood. Okay? And so they're waiting for it to rise and fill up with blood, and you can see the pieces of the baby coming into the tube. And what you're really waiting on is a very loud suction sound, a very big slurping sound. That's the baby's head. That always comes out last. Once you've heard that, you know the abortion is done. And then you go back in with the curette. You scrape. You go back in with the suction. You suction it out. You get the rest of the blood and any residual tissue, and then you're done. Then that jar really is full of blood. It's a large jar. It's full of blood. That goes into the products of conception lab. That's dumped out. Everything's pieced together. And that's really a first trimester abortion. Second trimester abortion happens between typically about 15 and 20 weeks, 21 weeks, give or take. And that is called a D&E abortion. That's a dilation and extraction, and or evacuation. And so what they do is they dilate the uterus, and they do it through something called laminaria, and it's seaweed. It's little seaweed sticks, and they pack a ton of them. They just pack a ton of seaweed sticks into the woman's cervix on day 1. And those seaweed sticks, they suck up all of the moisture in a woman's cervix. And so it's sort of a gradual dilation for the woman, because they have to dilate her cervix a lot to get a baby out that's that large. And then day 2, they have her come back, and a D&E abortion, an evacuation abortion, is a little bit different because the baby's too big to fit through a suction tube, and the parts are too big, the parts are too fleshy, and they're too connected. The connective tissue is too well formed. And so what they do is they will go in and they will take something called a Sofer clamp, which is a clamp that has little teeth on the end of it. It's like a circle on the end, and it has teeth on it. And they put that in to the uterus, and they will find the baby's leg or arm, depending on what they find first. They will clamp it shut, they will grasp it, and they just rip the arm and leg off piece by piece. And they pull the limbs off first. And then they will then end up crushing the head, and then pulling out the torso. And then they'll go in once again with a curette and scrape the uterus. At this point, they've got to get a placenta out. They've got to get a placenta out, do a suction. And again, perforation risk very high, because they're going in with sharp instruments to remove the baby. Infection rates higher because you're introducing so many instruments over and over again to the uterus. And then the third trimester abortion, which is, I say third trimester abortion only happens, 1% of the time, but that 1% equals about 18,000 abortions every year. So 18,000 is a lot of babies. The majority of these are actually elective abortions. So people who are not experienced in abortion, just typical people on social media will say, oh, these abortions only happen when the life of the mother is at risk, or if something's really, really wrong with the baby. That's actually not true. Abortionists have admitted that all over research articles. National Abortion Federation has admitted that. The Guttmacher Institute, which is Planned Parenthood's research arm, has admitted that. The overwhelming majority, vast majority of third trimester abortions, now these are abortions up until the date of birth, are happening for elective reasons. And you can find that documented everywhere. It's not happening because the woman's life is at risk. Abortion doesn't save the life of a mom,
No.
guys. Delivery does. Okay? You don't have to kill a baby to save the life of a mom.
No.
You deliver the baby, and then you try to save the life of the baby as well as the life of the mom. Killing the baby never has saved the life of a mother. Okay? So, and any OBGYN will tell you that. So any OBGYN worth their salt will tell you that. Any OBGYN not paid by the abortion industry will tell you that. Yeah. The third trimester abortion is a little bit different. Babies are generally delivered whole at this point, intact, because their bodies are it's too difficult to tear them. And so what generally happens is they have a medication called digoxin, which is a legitimate cardiac medication. And so what they'll do is they will, similar to like an amniocentesis, they will take a long needle, they will inject that into the woman's abdomen or in through the vaginal canal, into the amniotic fluid. Depending on the skill of the abortionist, they will either direct it into the fetal heart directly, and they will give an overdose of medication to the baby's heart, causing a heart attack, an overdose of the baby. Or they will put it into the amniotic fluid, the baby drinks the medication, causing an overdose. So it depends on the skill of the abortion doctor. Either way, it takes time for the baby to die, and many women will say they actually felt their baby kicking and struggling during the overdose process. Then the abortion clinic will have the woman then come back in a couple of days to verify that the baby is dead through an ultrasound. If they're not dead, they will then give them yet another injection of digoxin to complete the overdose. And then they'll come back and they actually then will induce labor. And the woman will, but they'll have them sedated, so the medical staff will most of the time be the ones that are physically pushing on the woman's abdomen to push the baby out of her womb, and she delivers a dead, intact baby. And many of these late-term abortion providers, they actually incinerate the babies there. They cremate the babies there on site. They will have crematoriums there on site. They will provide footprints, handprints to the moms that choose late-term abortion. They have something called comfort care. They will take pictures of the aborted babies for the parents. They will provide a certificate of death to the parents. So it's really a strange, bizarre sort of operation that they have going on there. There's only one abortionist in the country that will actually do abortions up until 40 weeks gestation, and his name is Dr. Warren Hearn, and he's in Boulder, Colorado. There are several that will do them up till 32 weeks gestation, but only one that will go up until 40 plus weeks. And he charges about, for like 32, 36 week abortion, he charges about $17,000. And the government will pay for it.
I know this has been very sobering. I've noticed how quiet you've all gotten, but I think we need to hear this.
Alec, I'd like to just say something here for any woman or man that has been involved. God sees your heart. He's forgiven you. We don't judge you. And your pain is still real. And I'm so sorry. It is important that we know the truth. But we grieve with you.
We actually, both during the intermission, which we're about to take, as well as after, we have some pastors available in the prayer room. If any of you have gone through an abortion and just need to have someone pray with you, when you get to the lobby, if you'll turn left and go as far as you can go, that will run you straight into our prayer room, and we'd be honored to have some folks there just pray with you. The reason that I wanted Abby to do this, and I hadn't talked to her beforehand, is I think the industry has done a tremendous job of keeping this sort of hidden from all of us. And much like the public opinion switched on smoking when we started seeing some graphic photographs of people suffering various cancers as a result of smoking, I do think if we're going to see this thing turned around in our lifetime, and I think we have to take that posture. One of the first moments that was an awakening moment for me that Westgate needed to do this kind of stuff is when I mentioned abortion in a few months before the election, and was accused of being partisan. And I said, wait a bit, this is a biblical, moral life issue. Don't sell me down the river by saying I'm being partisan because I bring it up. And that's when I realized that the church, I think that's when I realized the church has been silent too long. And I really think, I don't know if you remember, those of you who were here, the videotape sermon that we played of Lou Engle. And if you were here in one of those services, we had to run the first service into the second service because one of the challenges he gave is that he believes God is raising up Esthers in the Church of Jesus in America that will get this thing turned around. And I do think that's one of the things God is doing. But please, like Carrie said, if you've been impacted, if you had an abortion here tonight, we believe the blood of Jesus Christ covers all of our transgressions. Right. All of our transgressions.
That's right.
And he heals and restores.
That's right.
But before we take a break, we had a very interesting conversation just before we came out here. And actually, Charlie Kirk commented on the same thing. One of the dangers that the Church of Jesus faces right now is that we are obviously high on compassion. We're high in compassion for the victims, the broken, and the hurting. And if we're not careful, we allow that compassion to somehow subdue our moral outrage that we are having things happening in our country every day that we criticize Hitler's regime for doing in the concentration camps. When I heard, and these are the specialists here, not me, but when I heard the Clinton administration was aiming for partial birth abortion, where a baby's brain cells could be harvested before the baby came out of the birth canal, I thought, how could we ever criticize Dr. Mengele for what he did in the concentration camps? We're doing the very same thing in this nation. So I don't know if there's anything you want to add to.
I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I want to say this, I've had 2 abortions. I've participated in over 22,000. I run a ministry. I started a ministry for former abortion clinic workers. We've helped 600 abortion clinic workers leave their jobs and come into and come into a saving relationship with Christ. And let me just say, when we have healing retreats, we require, one of the requirements that is part of our retreat is we have them put a number on the amount of abortions that they help to participate in. We have had people with numbers 180,000 and even higher. And we have them do that, not because I want to torture them or because I want to make them feel bad necessarily, but because we can't heal from something if we don't know what we're healing from.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
I recognize that I killed 2 of my children. I was complicit in the murder of 2 of my children. I recognize it. I own that. I had to heal from it. I had to actively engage in that healing. I had to actively engage in that healing with the help of Jesus Christ. I couldn't do it alone, but I had to own that sin. And we all have to own our sin.
Yeah.
We have to own what we've done. And God just doesn't forgive us outright until we ask for it. Right? We've got to be repentant. We have to ask for that forgiveness. And if we ask for it, He'll be sure to do it.
Yeah.
But we have to ask for it. We have to believe in it. We have to desire it. And He will do it.
Yes. Yes, He will.
And so, I think that one of the things that's happening, that I see happening, is, I've been seeing it happen for the past few years. Satan is quick to abuse our compassion. He will mislead the church with its compassion. And so we're so like, love everybody, love. Mercy, mercy, mercy. But God is also a God of justice. And there will be justice for these innocent babies. There will be. I believe that.
Yeah.
And we have got to recognize that. And we have got to accept our part in where we have failed, in what we have done, and in what we have failed to do. In our complacency toward this issue, in where we have stayed silent, in where we have been apathetic. In my opinion, to be apathetic is to be complacent, to be complicit. And so, we cannot, I think yes, God is love. Yes, absolutely, the Bible says that. But God is just. And we cannot forget that. And we're so worried about acceptance and tolerance and this false unity. God talks about separating the wheat from the chaff, y'all. There will be division.
Yeah.
It's not always going to be about this like false sense of unity and let's love everybody and love. You are going to love people straight to hell if you do not call them out in their sin. If you do not talk to them about sin. If we do not speak the truth, and I'm not talking about your truth and my truth and his truth, and I'm talking about the truth with a capital T. We are loving people straight to hell. And that is not love. That is not love. I'm not saying we've got to be a clanging gong. That's not what we are. That's not who we are as Christians. But we are to speak truth into the lives of people that we meet. We are to do it with love. We are to do it with charity. And we are going to offend people, guys. People who are opposed to the truth of Christ are going to constantly be offended. That's the way it is. That doesn't mean we don't speak truth.
I would like to add one thing to what Abby said. We have had some conversation prior to this evening, and the three of us are concerned about the pastors who've been silent on this issue. And the reason we're concerned is exactly what she just said. The role of the church at large, all the fivefold leadership ministries and all the rest of the teaching, it's not just the pastor's job. When a pastor, though, is silent on an issue that impacts, 1 in 4 women in his congregation, it leaves the suffering person there alone, and then they don't hear the gospel and the freedom that they can have. And so it keeps them in the dark, keeps them isolated, which is exactly where Satan wants somebody who has gone through the pain and heartache of an abortion or other issues. So pastors don't need to talk about abortion every time from the pulpit, but when they say nothing, when the church has nothing going on, when there's no healing place to go, or there's no mention of it, or no altar moment. You had all those women that came forward because all those women have either been impacted or know someone really close to them, and they needed to bring it to the Lord's grace and mercy and be freed. And if we're not freeing people, we're keeping them silent, and that is exactly part of the problem in the church. We're begging you pastors who are watching to get educated, be trained on how to be winsome and grace-filled, but do not stay silent anymore. We cannot afford to lose one more child.
I think with your permission, we're going to skip the intermission. And if you need to make a quick potty stop, excuse yourself and head out there. I just want to highlight before we get to your questions. I want to get straight to your questions. But I do want to highlight organizations that are in the lobby at our request that will help with pro-life issues and help with adoption issues. We may do in the future an entire Sunday apologia just on adoption, because we understand there are organizations that Catherine has spoken to on the adoption side of the subject who just didn't feel like there was enough time for them to do the presentation as well as to have Abby here. So, but in the lobby is 40 Days for Life, pro-life organization focused on prayer and fasting. Abundant Life, resource aggregate for women who decide to keep their babies. Sidewalk Advocates for Life, a pro-life advocate group, sidewalk ministry group outside of abortion clinics. 3W Medical Clinic for Women, Women's Health and Pregnancy Resource Center. And then Ever Vigilant, on behalf of parents and families, is the Family Policy Institute of Washington. And I don't know if Mark Malosha is out there or some of his staff, but they are watching Olympia for us, because I got to tell you, one of the first apologias we did last February was with 3 overtly Christian legislators. And our state is going after, the legislators of our state are going after parental rights. And I got to tell you, that is as egregious to me. You whisk my 12-year-old granddaughter off and give her some hormone treatment, and I'm just saying. So just on the humorous side, before we get to your questions, I don't know how this happened, but this week, with me on the address, I received a packet from Planned Parenthood. I am now a member, a card-carrying member. Alec Rollins. I don't know if one of our youth did it as a prank, but I'm now a card-carrying member of Planned Parenthood. Plus, I have a bumper sticker for my car. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy? Just out of the blue. So we're going to fill this envelope, like Abby said, with all kinds of junk and send it back because it's prepaid return mail. All right, thank you. Questions?
Alec, before you get to that too, I wanted to bring something up just to stay kind of connected to what Abby's saying. She's taking the lead here. She mentioned that the procedures, chemical abortion used to be about 5%. Now it's about 39%, I just read, of the abortions taking place. So the numbers of abortions have changed, but chemical abortion is becoming a very large focus. And during COVID, there was a lot of things being mailed out to people, and we're deeply concerned about that. But I wanted to mention that because it's a whole nother process that we won't probably have time to get into, but it's just as deadly and just as painful and just as isolating and harmful to both mom and baby.
Yeah, actually, I should mention that. Medication abortion, it's actually higher than that. It's about 50% of abortions that are taking place in the country. In 2001, it was about 60%, 6% of abortions were done through a series of pills. Now it's about 50%, and about 50% of those are done through online methods. So people are just getting them by typing in their information. They're being mailed through the post office into their mailbox.
Yeah.
So these are women, girls, whoever. They're not verifying IDs. You can be any age.
Right.
Without parental consent, parental knowledge. They're just going online. They're filling out their information. They're getting these pills sent to them in the mail for like $100, $150. And they're taking them without ever seeing a doctor, without ever having an ultrasound, without ever verifying how far along they are in their pregnancy, without ever walking into a medical facility. And, you know, this is very, very dangerous. I mean, if you saw Unplanned, you saw my experience with medication abortion, and I was only 8 weeks gestation. So now the FDA has pushed up the regs to 12 weeks gestation. We're talking about, you know, these girls could be getting medication abortion at 14, 16 weeks. Their bodies cannot naturally pass a baby at 14 and 16 weeks. Now we're talking about a dead baby in their body for weeks. Now the risk is them dying of sepsis, hemorrhage, and their parents have no idea they're even pregnant. I mean, this is really happening in our country. There are already girls that have died because of this. So this is a real threat. This is a new threat. They're always looking for new ways to kill babies. And now, you know, they're so desperate to kill our children that they're willing to kill their mothers in the process. And that's really what tells you that this is truly demonic forces at work.
That's right.
That, you know, abortion's not just wrong, it's not just bad, it is evil. And abortion's been, you know, child sacrifice has been going on since scriptural times, right? We see it with Baal, we see it with Molech, we see it in all this, you know, in the Bible. We just call it something different today. We call it abortion, we call it pregnancy termination, we call it reproductive justice, right?
Yes.
We call it women's rights. In the end, it's just child sacrifice. It always has been, always will be. And this is a spiritual battle that we are fighting, and it is run by Satan. It is truly from the pit of hell.
That actually responds to the first question about child sacrifice. And I remember that it was your friend, Dr. Frank Pavone from Priests for Life, who talked to me one time in Washington, D.C. about it's not a coincidence that this is my body. The chant, "This is my body," is the very words of Jesus as he inaugurates communion and says, "This is my body." That it's a frightening parody of the sacrifice of Christ. Does Planned Parenthood sell the aborted children to researchers, pharmaceutical companies?
Yeah, they do. Now it's not quite as widespread as people think it is. I mean, still just as egregious, but there are about 70 Planned Parenthood affiliates nationwide. There are only 5 that actually participate in that fetal tissue research program. Now, they are the 5 largest because they have the highest volume of output for abortion. So my affiliate was one of them. We participated in that research program. It's not something that's ever been hidden. It was not something that we hid from the public. We were actually quite proud of it. It was something that we said, we felt like it was very altruistic. We felt like it was something that we were doing for the greater good, for the common good. How many times have we heard that phrase over the past 2 years? You do it for the common good. I swear that phrase is evil. But
Yep.
we said that, it's for the common good. If you're going to have an abortion anyway, why not do something good
Like organ donations
from it, right?
of sorts,
Yeah, like if you're going to be having an abortion, then might as well help cure Parkinson's, right? I mean, and even Christians fell into that when that was taking place. There were some Christians that were like, well, that makes sense, right? But the bottom line is that God's never going to use something as evil as an abortion to make you well, okay? And my personal opinion, I'm not going to allow myself to get well off of the backs of aborted babies. So...
Right.
Even if they can, I won't. So I will
right.
not comply with that. I will not do that.
Does an abortion affect a woman's body long term? And can you speak a little about the psychological impact of an abortion on the mother?
Sure. I mean, it can. It absolutely can. And many times it doesn't. So, the overwhelming majority of women have abortions and go on to have subsequent pregnancies with no problem, with no, permanent damage. That's why we see women having 10, 12, 15, 18 abortions. Because by and large, women do have abortions without any permanent physical damage. But it can. If you are a person that does have a complication from an abortion, if you have a uterine perforation that can cause serious scar tissue to form in your uterus, it can cause problems with future implantation of a child in the uterus. It can cause, persistent miscarriage. We know that there is a connection between abortion and breast cancer. So I mean, there can be a physical risk. The greater risk is emotional health. That is a greater problem than physical complications, are the emotional complications that come with abortion. Now, if you read studies that come out from, Cosmo or Vanity Fair, they will say, or any study that's funded by Planned Parenthood, they will say, there's absolutely nothing wrong with women that have abortions. There's no side effects. There's no emotional repercussion. You should also note, though, and in fact, the one that most recently came out, they surveyed 667 women, and they surveyed them within the first year of having an abortion. I would say, absolutely, if you would have surveyed me the first year after both of my abortions, I would have absolutely told you that I had no abortion regret. It's very common. Generally, trauma response is not triggered until 5 to 10 years, sometimes even as much as 20 years after the traumatic event. So asking someone who's gone through a traumatic event a year after that trauma, do you feel traumatized? You're not going to get an accurate read on that. And anybody with any mental health training, mental health degree will be able to tell you that. So all of the studies, though, that say, 95% of women don't have abortion regret, if you look at who's funding them, they're all funded by pro-abortion organizations. But if you look at studies that are funded, that not the funding necessarily, but if you look at studies that are done, that the sample was women who were asked 15, 20 years after the abortion, an appropriate trauma response time, you see the exact opposite. You see something like 80 to 90% of women saying that they do regret their abortion. And so, it's all about the study. You can find studies that basically fit whatever you want them to say. So.
I'd like to add to that too. Recently, and this was years ago, they did some research at Fred Hutch, which is here in the Seattle area, and they looked at the women who'd had abortions and how it impacted breast cancer. And the woman who did the study, actually, my mother-in-law was on her team at one point, and they found a 50% increase. And the community, the abortion-minded community, was so upset with her that she redid the study, which means she changed the control group and she changed it. It still came in at 25, 30% increase. But the results are real. And you mentioned emotional. Spiritually, it's even worse. Every sin, it separates us from God, so there's no question. But what the Bible says, when you sin against your own body, so sexuality, if you look at Scripture, people say, well, all sin is the same at the cross. It's actually not. When you sin with your body records, your body remembers, your body is sacred, your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, and it does impact you. Yes, there's forgiveness, but there will be residue in your body, and you will have signs of it later, sadly. But I also want the men in the room to know that abortion affects men in ways that people haven't really understood until recently. And Brad Mattis, who is with Life Issues Institute, has done a great deal of work on that. For example, a man who's been involved in an abortion, not only did he have loss, but he is going to find himself challenged later in life to finish things. Now, isn't that interesting? He's going to have issues in other parts of his life that he's not going to really recognize are related to the abortion. But that's actually one of the things that he found, and many, many more. And men really do suffer, because anytime that you take life, that we're not designed to take life. We're not designed to even die. Originally, we were designed to live forever, right? So death hurts us no matter what the world tells you. And that's why we look for recovery. That's why we look for help. That's why people medicate, is because when you've had death enter into your story, you're looking for all kinds of ways to medicate. And many of you probably recognize that in your own lives. So don't just think about the women involved, think about the men involved as well.
But I will say, as far as psychological statistics, women who have abortions are 6 times more likely to commit suicide. They are more likely to struggle with eating disorders, depression, anxiety, postpartum depression. So we do see an increase in psychological disorders for women who have suffered through abortion, particularly unhealed abortion hurt.
Abby, how do you respond to the arguments we've all had down through the years about what do you do about a victim of rape, incest? How do you respond to those?
Well, I mean, there's several different answers to that. I mean, sort of the simple answer is, a baby is a baby is a baby, right? I mean, we don't ever punish a child for the sins of its parent. If I steal a pack of gum, we don't give my child the sentence for my theft, right? But if we, as a person who says, I'm for women, a lot of our society is very research-driven. And so there's actually been a pretty good amount of research done on this particular topic. One woman is a woman named Dr. Susan McCorn, and she has done some pretty impactful research on this topic. She's a secular researcher. But what we know to be true is that, number one, the overwhelming majority of women who actually do conceive from rape choose to parent their children. So, you know, the pro-abortion movement would have you believe that everyone conceives from rape has an abortion. But that's actually not what statistics tell us. But Dr. Susan McCorn her research has shown us that women who choose to parent their children conceived in rape or choose to place their children for adoption that are conceived in rape, fare significantly better long-term emotionally than those who choose to have abortions. And she has surveyed many women in her studies, and she has surmised that it is because women who have been sexually assaulted and then choose abortion later are healing from yet another traumatic event. Mm-hmm. And many of these women say that they felt re-victimized, that they felt re-traumatized from the abortion. And so now they're not just having to heal from the actual sexual assault, but now they're having to heal from a separate wound of the abortion. And she has just a lot of information on this. And so for me, I'm like, look, if I'm a person who says that they are for women, if I'm a person who is pro-life because I am pro-woman, then I cannot in good conscience tell a woman, well, I'm for you, and even though I know this information exists, even though I know the research is out there that tells me that you're not going to do well if you choose abortion and you've conceived in rape, but I still want you to choose that anyway, right? Even though I know that that's going to be the outcome for you, and I know the better outcome is for you to either choose life and choose to parent or choose to place for adoption, but I still want you to make the decision that's going to be the worse for you. That would not be me being pro-woman, right? So I actually am pro-woman. So I want her to choose an option where she's going to fare the very best emotionally. And so that's usually how I answer that question. I have a series of apologetics answers to things just like this. And this is one of the sort of myths that we answer. They're called Myth Busted. It's a Myth Busted series. And if you go to my YouTube, my Abby Johnson YouTube, we have, I don't know, probably 15 or 20 on our Myth Busted series. It's just sort of, common things that you hear. God can't forgive abortion, or, women are, better off having an abortion after rape, or just different things, sort of common arguments. Abortion only makes up 3% of Planned Parenthood's, numbers. Things that you hear all the time. Margaret Sanger wasn't a racist. I'm trying to think of things that we've done. Just various things that we've done. Yeah. Just common myths that you hear from people that support abortion over and over and over again. We made this series. They're quick videos. They're all about 3 to 5 minutes long. They're quick videos. We made them with the intention that pro-lifers would be able to say, every time they see that myth pop up from someone who's pro-abortion, they'd be able to say, I got a video for that. I got a video you can watch, right? I got a video that debunks everything you just said, right? And we do it with facts. We do it with data. And we do it in a quick manner, so it's a quick watch, but it's all backed up with evidence. And so if you go to my YouTube, you can find, we did one on the Girl Scouts the Girl Scouts very actively and heavily supports Planned Parenthood.
Yes.
And the abortion agenda. So we did one on the Girl Scouts. We did one on Planned Parenthood sex education program. Lots of different things. So you can find those at my YouTube.
Talk to us about what's happening in Texas and Missouri, stuff that I didn't think any of us would live to see. But talk to us about what's happening.
Yeah. So, Texans are always proud to be Texans.
Everything's bigger in
and
Texas.
I am. But I have to say, I'm especially proud to be a Texan since we have the most restrictive abortion ban in the United States. It's very exciting. It's, we know that it's saving lives. We know that since September 1st, over 10,000 babies have been saved in the state. It's incredible. We're very, very excited. We're thrilled. Was it ideal? Was it exactly what we wanted? No. I mean, ideally, you want the government to sort of enforce with criminal penalties for those who break the law, but we don't have that luxury right now with Roe v. Wade on the books. So you work with what you got, And so in Texas, we went through a civil course of action, which means that anyone who participates in an abortion past the detection of a heartbeat on a preborn human life, that means that you are in violation of the law. And that means that you can be sued by any private individual in the state of Texas. So that means if you drove someone to get an illegal abortion, if you are a pastor that counseled someone to get an illegal abortion, if you performed an illegal abortion, if you paid for someone to get an illegal abortion, if you are a parent and said, you have to get an abortion or you are kicked out of my home, if you coerced anyone in any way to get an illegal abortion, then you are in violation of that law and you can be held accountable for it. And of course, the left is freaking out because for the first time in 50 years, people are actually having to be held accountable for their decisions. And what a concept, right? Personal responsibility. So, abortion is a sacrament to the left. Yeah. And we are taking it away from them. Mm-hmm. And it's a beautiful thing. Mm-hmm. And Hollywood elites are freaking out. You would think that every woman in Texas is walking around pregnant looking for access to an abortion. The way they act. And but yeah, they're really hysterical right now. That's what the whole letter that Pastor got was about. It was about SB 8, the heartbeat law in Texas. And they're basically saying that, how dare we sue people that break the law? And I have a very, very simple solution to that. Don't break the law. If you don't break the law, you will not be sued. And it's so simple. In fact, that's good advice for everybody.
Right.
No matter what
God
we're
bless
talking
Texas.
about. If you don't want to get a speeding ticket, don't speed. It's crazy.
Can you tell she's a mother of 8?
I know it's novel advice.
I know.
But it's been pretty solid. It's worked for me for 41 years. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
So that's what's happening, and now we have I think six states in the United States that are down to one abortion facility. Good things are happening, incredible things are happening, and Florida just filed for a heartbeat law that's identical to the state of Texas. There's 5 states that make up over 50% of abortions in the United States. And it's Texas, Florida, Illinois. What are the other 2? California, New York. So if we can get, there's no hope for California, New York, and Illinois to pass the heartbeat law. So, not right now. So if we could get Florida and Texas to do that, that is a significant impact in saving lives of the preborn. And it looks like Florida's on their way. So it's amazing.
What steps can I take to ensure my tax dollars don't support abortion?
Don't pay taxes. That's the only way you can do it here. That's the only way you can do it here, honestly. Your state tax dollars go to fund abortion here in Washington State. Our federal tax dollars go to fund abortion. There's no way to get around it except to not pay taxes, which
We do have one church suing the state so that they don't have to pay or get insurance that requires that they pay for abortion. That's Cedar Park. No surprise, because there's one of the churches that stands up. So you can sue if you can try suing, maybe.
I've thought about creating a movement.
The Don't Pay Taxes movement?
Yeah. What's the IRS going to do to like 2 million of us, right?
Being pro-life isn't crazy enough for some people. We're going to not pay taxes now.
I could use that money.
I know, right?
Anyway, what I will say, though, is that, we don't have a lot to say in what happens to our taxes. What I will say is we do need to be very careful we can be very careful in how we give charitably. We can make better choices when we buy products. And so for me, it's like the Girl Scouts, for instance. I'm not supporting the Girl Scouts. Their money goes to Planned Parenthood. I'm not buying their overpriced crap cookies, right? So I'm not going to do that, right?
Those macaroons are awfully good.
Yeah, well.
And the thin mint cookie.
You know what? You can get the thin mints from Aldi's for $1. Okay, so do y'all have Aldi's up here?
Not that I'm piling on, but the Girl Scouts went sideways years ago. So Planned Parenthood and LGBTQ plan has all been underway for many years. There are many alternatives now, good Christian alternatives, and the Boy Scouts as well. If you want to talk about scouting, we have alternatives.
If you really get a hankering, I'll make you some and send them to you.
No more cookies.
I think we can't boycott everything, obviously, otherwise we'd live like in tents with like loincloths, out in the wilderness. But I think that we can be strategic, I think, especially with our charitable giving. I'm not going to give to Susan G. Komen, for instance. I'm not supporting all their pink nonsense. They give directly to Planned Parenthood. Their president is on the board of Planned Parenthood. I'm not doing it. There's many, many organizations that support Planned Parenthood. We need to do our due diligence when we're giving, to these organizations.
Right.
A sure bet, of places to give are pro-life organizations. Make sure you give your tithe. And, after you give your tithe, I give to pro-life organizations. There are organizations represented out here. I can tell you, none of these organizations are giving any money to Planned Parenthood. So, be wise with your charitable giving. And if you do decide, like, if you're like, you know what, I'm not going to go to Starbucks anymore. Okay, Starbucks, obviously, everything immoral they give to. Plus their coffee sucks. You guys are supposed to have like the best coffee up here, and like you guys are still drinking Starbucks. Anyway, if you're gonna do it though, like if you're gonna boycott something, don't just boycott it. You have to let them know. Yeah. They don't care if you're not buying their overpriced latte anymore, right? Like, they don't care if they're missing your $7. You have to let them know. You have to write a letter.
Yeah.
You have to tell them, right? I'm not buying your suck coffee anymore because you are giving to things that I don't agree with, And you write that letter, you put it on your computer, you send it in once a month, right? Like, set a reminder on your phone, mail boycott letters, right? And you print that sucker out and you mail it in, and you send an email and you do whatever. Like, you have to let them know, because you just not giving doesn't do any good. Like Johnson & Johnson, the baby product people, okay? They give to Planned Parenthood.
Yeah. So
don't just not buy their stuff anymore. You gotta let them know why, And so that can be powerful. Boycotts can be powerful, but don't just do it yourself. Like, get a group together, right? And say, we're not going to, like, get a group from your church or get a group of lady friends or your quilters club or whatever, and be like, we as a collective are not going to give to this anymore. And let's all write a letter. Let's share the letter. Let's all send it in once a month, right? For a year or whatever. It may not make a difference, but at least you feel good about it. And you're not giving your money there anymore. And save that money. Give it to an organization or whatever. Make your own bath soap. Make your own detergent, right?
Essential
whatever.
Oils.
Save some money.
Are big. Yeah.
And I just think we have to make conscious choices like that today. We have to make conscious decisions, and particularly, though, with our charitable giving.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I think we'll wrap up with this question. How can I effectively encourage my church's leadership to speak out more on controversial issues like abortion? I know you've got some thoughts about, we heard you talking on a talk show about pastors who are unwilling to say anything about abortion.
When I sat my whole life in a church that did not talk about the hard issues. And I never heard a sermon. I never sat in anything like this my whole life. And I was in church, every Sunday morning, every Sunday night, Wednesday night, youth group, youth camps, the whole bit, right? And I never heard things like this. I never heard my pastor talk about controversial issues. And that was detrimental to my formation growing up. And, when I had my abortions, I sat in church the Sunday before I had both of my abortions. And the Sunday after I had both of my abortions, I sat in church. The entire 8 years that I worked at Planned Parenthood, the entire 8 years that I worked at Planned Parenthood, I was in church every Sunday. We do have a silence problem in our church, and I think a lot of it is that we don't want to admit that we have a sin problem in our church. And but if we didn't, we wouldn't need a savior. And I mean, just for any pastors listening, just a little news flash. Every single congregant is a big old fat sinner. And
True.
They need to hear about sin. They need to hear about redemption. They need to hear about repentance. They need to hear about your sin, actually, and how you struggle with sin. They need to hear about your repentance. They need to hear humility from leadership. And, when we are silent on these issues, I think we do have a problem. Let me back up. I think we do have a problem because I think a lot of pastors are like, oh, this isn't happening in our church, but it is happening in our church, particularly with abortion. Pastors are often surprised when I tell them, look, all the time, women used to ask us to pray with them before we perform their abortion. All the time. All the time. Women would be lying on the clinic table with a rosary in their hand. All the time. Women would be sitting in the waiting room reading their Bible, waiting to have an abortion, waiting to be called back. These are our people.
Yeah.
These are not people from a different side of town or women from across the tracks or women we don't know. These are our people. Abortion is a sin issue, and as long as it's a sin issue, it's a church issue. And so, as long as we aren't talking about it, as long as we aren't recognizing that this is an our people issue, then basically what we're saying to the people sitting in our pews is really one of two things. One is, well, it's not that big of a deal, right? I mean, the word abortion isn't technically in the Bible, so we're just not going to address it. Or abortion is so bad that you have committed the unforgivable sin. And so we're not even going to touch it because it's that bad. And that's a lie. Right. That is a lie straight from hell. And so we've got, and really you're causing them additional suffering by not talking about it. We worry about offending people. I know that pastors worry about offending people, but really they're offending them more by keeping them separated from their Father. And so we need to root this out of the church. We need to root this sin out. We need to root this sin of worrying about offense. That needs to be rooted out of the church. We need to only worry about speaking gospel truth. Because at the end of our lives, we're not going to be standing face to face with one another. We're going to be standing face to face with the one true God. And so we're going to be accountable to him for what we've done and what we haven't done. And I think particularly pastors who are listening, you're going to be held to an even greater standard for what you've done and what you haven't done. And because you've taken on a calling. you've taken on a responsibility by committing to be a pastor. You have taken on a greater calling to lead people to Christ. And if you aren't doing that, if you aren't calling people to repentance each and every time you step foot behind that pulpit, I believe you will be held responsible for that. And that is a great commitment that you have made to the Lord. And I got to tell you, I fear not, I don't fear doing what God tells me to do. I fear not doing what he tells me to do. And that's really where we all need to be in our lives. And so people come up to me and they tell me all the time, like, I wish I was as courageous as you are. And I'm like, you are. God has given you
Amen.
that power. He has given you that courageous, that same power that we read about in Scripture, that lives in all of you.
Yeah.
You are that powerful. You are that courageous. You are that brave. You've got to find it. You've got to use it. Because your words, that power that lives in you through Jesus Christ, you could save a life with it.
That's right.
You could
I like
bring
it.
somebody to eternal life
Amen.
because of it. That matters.
Yeah.
And so use it.
Amen.
Yeah.
I'd like to just add another word of encouragement to that. Thank you so much, Abby, for everything that you've said. For the pastors who are listening, to those of you who love your pastor enough to prayerfully approach him on this issue, there's a lot of help outside when you go out there, and you'll be able to talk to Abby as well. But here's the thing, that we need to pray for our pastors because they are getting pressured from both sides to speak and not to speak. And I'm excited to tell you, at our institute, we're actually working on a project for pastors. And we're going to make it a worldwide platform for free to talk about all the hot button issues. We've been working on it for about a year and a half now, and collaborating. We've been privileged to be given permission to include the movie Unplanned in the abortion course, which is about 80 pages at this point, and lots of. It's going to be a great course. But pastor, be encouraged because there's help coming. Because we know the pastor cares. The pastor loves. They are afraid to speak up, but they won't be afraid if you tell them we're with you, we're praying for you, we're going to get you the best material we can get for you, we're going to help educate you or help you understand us better, whatever you're going through. But don't just wait for the pastor. Let's get them the help that they need and prayerfully do whatever you can. We're doing what we can. And of course, I know Abby's doing amazing things as well. And just so appreciate you, Pastor Alec, for being willing to speak out on these issues, to humble yourself enough to say, come on our platform, Abby, and tell us what we don't know. And I want to honor you for that as well.
Thank you.
And I will say that if you do have a pastor that speaks out on this, thank him.
Yes.
Encourage him.
Yes.
Even if he says like one thing. Like even if during the sermon, like he dares to say like, an abortion's wrong. Like just like very quickly. Or if he's like, and we love the sanctity of human life. Like you just like really quickly be like, thank you so much. Like flood him with like encouragement, because even if he says that one thing, he's gonna get so much hate from within his own church. And so I think sometimes we take that for granted. Like our pastors need to hear, like every single one of you should be sending this pastor a thank you at the end of this, and thanking him for doing this. Because, like, this is my full-time gig. This is what I do. I go around the country and speak full-time. I do this, like, 90 times a year. And I'm maybe, out of 90 times a year, I'm maybe in 8 churches a year. So this is rare. And so you need to thank your pastor for any leadership that they show in this area. So
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you to all of you. Your interest, your passion in these subjects is palpable. It's very real. So we appreciate you being here. Otherwise, this would be kind of a flat evening if it was just the three of us on the platform and my wife sitting down in the front row. So thank you for being here. I want to encourage you. I feel like, by the grace of God, we're bringing you in Apologia some of the finest speakers on these subjects, really, in the nation. So if you're from another church, without detracting at all from your commitments and tithes to your local church, which is where they belong, if you're able to help Apologia at all, go on the Westgate Chapel website and you can find the ability right there to give. It would help us immensely. We've just finished a leadership meeting saying, well, this was a great year. We've had some incredible guests. Do we just call it quits, or do we go ahead in 2022? And we honestly are feeling like spiritually we're in a war here in the Pacific Northwest. I told Westgate this morning. Catherine, my daughter and son-in-law, took their kids to Disney World in Florida, and when they got off the plane, they palpably. Now, I'm not saying move to Florida now, okay, but they palpably felt the difference in the atmosphere. Yeah. And we had the privilege of going to a church in Birmingham 3 weeks ago and ministering Sunday through Wednesday night, and it was the same in Birmingham. When we got off the plane, it's like you go into restaurants, it's different. The atmosphere is totally different. And our tendency initially is, let's look for some property in Birmingham, you know. I don't want to go to Montana because that's where everybody else is going from. But then you realize, no, listen, we're in a fight here. And this is the place. I love that line. Westgate folks are tired of hearing me quote it, but it's from the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and it's the last return of the king. And the king is on his way back to being coronated and surrounded. His little puny army is surrounded by billions, looks like, of the opposition coming at him. And if you've seen the scene, he's on his horse, and it's a war horse. It's snorting. It's ready for battle. And he says to his troops, there may come a day when even brave men run from the battle, but this is not that day. And I want to say to us here in Washington, so if you can help us at all financially, that would be huge as we make our plans. Charlie Kirk has already said he's coming back here. He enjoyed the first time so much. So we're looking forward to 2022. Please take advantage of the ministries that so graciously have got tables out in the lobby for you on all of these issues. And I also want to thank Carrie Abbott for helping me tonight.
My pleasure.
TheLegacyInstitute.com, right, for those resources. But would you join me in one more time thanking Abby Johnson for coming tonight? I don't know if there's anybody on the slides up there, but can we close with what is our Westgate Chapel benediction? I'm sure you will remember it. Those of you who from Westgate can help me. But let the words of my mouth, the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. God bless you. Thank you for being here tonight.